You alright? I'm World Around You, and this is Pause for Thought on Threshold FM. And I did tease this one a little bit last time, and I've teased it on a little Facebook video recently, and hopefully it's going to help the little wooden cryptids on my website make a little bit more sense as well. Because we've already covered the Tuscumbian space penguins, the Loveland frogman of Ohio, and the Mothman. Even though I don't think the Mothman is one of the wooden cryptids. You've got the Beast of Bodmin more though. But anyway, I think it only makes sense that we then cover this guy at some point as well. So I figured, why not this week, while we're fresh in our mind with the image of the Loveland frogman of Ohio with his cock out, because obviously everybody's gone and bought those t-shirts now from worldaroundyou.com, and people must be really enjoying those at this point. Anyway, what we're on about is this creature, right? And it terrorises the English countryside. It's about the height of an ostrich. It's got big wings, mate, like a fucking albatross. Strong talons, like an hawk. That it could use to fucking rip up rats in a field, mate. Beady eyes, like a seagull. Feathered, like a pigeon. Not in colour or patination, just in the way that a pigeon's got feathers. It's got legs like a goose, and the mythological status of a phoenix. This week, we're looking into the Cornish Owlman, but let's have a song to get us going. This is Chris Webby, JP and Kasky with Demons. So, getting into the Cornish Owlman, or, the Owlman of Cornwall, maybe even more specifically the Owlman of Mawnan, which immediately just makes it sound more mythical and like it's something from fucking Lord of the Rings or something. Almost like someone purposely chose this area for the monster to dwell, which does raise some suspicions, but we'll ignore those for now. A lot of people say that there's a lot of similarities as well between the Mothman and the Cornish Owlman because of the glowing eyes that they have, and they've got an ability to fly, and they're just rare to see. There's a certain scarcity in appearances between the two of them. But like a lot of guest features, usually you'll notice that less is more, innit? There's now better than a new album coming out, and you see a few artists on there that you already know and like. I mean, just look at Bigfoot. He's oversaturated, isn't it? Everywhere you look, there's footprints in ceramic, there's fucking merch, there's fucking the cast of a footprint, there's clumps of hair, there's skunk ape this, woodwall that. Owlmen, they're few and far between, mate. Not many owlmen knocking about. And from what I can tell, the Cornish Owlman is quite possibly the only owlman out there, or at least the only owlman on record. Or because if there was more than one, there'd be owlman. Which is going to confuse a lot of things as we go through this, I think. But the name of the Cornish Owlman, anyway, that implies that there could be a Merseyside Owlman, aka, like the Evertonian pigeon, or the Yorkie Owlman, or, as I would prefer to call it, the Tyke Owlman, because it'd make people double take if you start shouting in the streets or outside of a church, being like, I just got fucking attacked by that Tyke Owlman. In the cemetery last night, and then before you know it, someone's going down to the pub and telling Fat Brenda Owlman that someone's saying that you've been touching people up in the cemetery and attacking people again. Down at Fat Brenda's, being like, Brenda fucking, or they're just down at the hairdressers and that, or down at the corner shop, being like, you heard what Brenda Owlman's been doing? Yeah, she's been doing it again, mate. Yeah, she did though. She loved prison, to be fair, though. Flourished in there. But then again, I do like the idea that tyke could be a term for a young lesbian, not in a derogatory sense, just in the way that, like homosexual men have got loads of denominations of themselves. I like the idea that tyke could be a recently uncloseted lesbian woman. But obviously I know that double take that's happening in this hypothetical situation probably says more about the person that's earwigging than it does about the Owlman, or as it does about Brenda Owlman in this situation that doesn't exist. But we'll get back to facts. The Owlman that is in Cornwall isn't in North Yorkshire, so the Tyke Owlman doesn't exist. It's only the Cornish Owlman. And and besides, in back in North Yorkshire with this Tyke Owlman, they're immediately off and out and about blaming Fat Brenda for molesting people in the grounds of a church, rather than actually listening to the victim of this traumatic experience involving a potentially demonic creature, innit? Or if a newspaper interview with a paranormal investigator called Mark Davies is to be believed, a demonic creature. But we'll get into him a little bit later on. We only tease with the Davies around here. You never lead with your Davies. You want to tease with him. Anyway, what we need to do is set the scene. So we're in southern Cornwall, so you got to make sure you're wearing the right colours. We're a stone's throw away from a place called Lizard. So you couldn't have the Owlman of Lizard, because people would just be very confused. And we're a pebble dash away from Falmouth as well. The year is 1976. Apple Computers was being started by Steve Jobs and some guy that nobody knows the name of. A possible indication that aliens were involved, because this technology here from Apple had gone on to mould the world in ways that even the fucking Umbrella Corporation would be jealous of, mate. Now, the first female president of the world as well in this year, 1976, was getting kicked out of a job and chased out of Argentina. England was coming towards the end of the Cod War, and the Americans were about to land their first machines on Mars in what would become an at least 50-year campaign to convince the public that Mars exists. The English started messing with ethereal barriers too by releasing Concorde for its first commercial flight. I can't remember where to and from. I presume from England in somewhere. But Concorde was the first commercial plane at least, or commercial jet or private jet, non-military jet as far as I'm aware, that could pierce the sound barrier. So that means that they were piercing the protective sound barrier that floats all around the world, potentially protecting us from them sounds that Michael Tallinger spoke of with his planetary rings. Not like Saturn, but with the noise that a planet makes. So is it by sending Concorde out and about, putting holes in this ethereal barrier, is that what caused the leaks for these creatures to start existing and coming into our reality more and more? There was a lot of monsters and threats from monsters and the fear of supernatural beings floating in the zeitgeist that year. You had The Omen, that came out that year. King Kong, that came out a lot later in the year than April. The first one happened in April, but we'll get there in a minute. And The Beast, that was fucking Sylvester Stallone. He was about to star in Rocky as well. Now, we know what the time 1976 had and what it felt like. Now we can understand more about the events of 17th of April 1976, which is the first sighting on record of the Cornish Owlman. Though a Cornish newspaper that I found claims that there's actually records of it since the 1920s, and I can't find anywhere online where they got that from, and odds are neither can they. So is that part of a massive misinformation campaign around cryptids? Are they trying to trick us? Are they trying to make us believe in them? Are they trying to make us believe that they've been here for a lot longer, giving them some form of grandfather rights, so that when a law does come around where it's like, oh, alien invaders or whatever are all around us, you need to fucking kill them if you can, shoot them, we've now made ray guns that can kill ethereal beings, use the ray guns, but not the Owlman, not Owlman of Mawnan. Don't do him. Don't do Mothman either, he's been here a while. No Bigfoots, just anything else that you're not sure of. When you see it and you're like, never heard of that one, have it, pop it like a pew, get in with one of those. Maybe it's something to do with that, and then they can keep them alive. Maybe they want them to breed. Maybe they want to breed the owlmans. I don't know what baby owls are called. I imagine chicks. But I'd like to think there's a nice name for it, like there is with swans. Swans are called cygnets. A baby owl could be called, I don't know. I haven't got a clue. A chick. We'll go with owl chick. It doesn't sound right, but, an owl, a chickman, a chid. Would it be called a chid? Because a baby man is a kid. A baby, chick, chibi, chibbies. You got the chibbies of Cornwall. The Cornwall chibbies. And that sounds like it'd be a fucking well good football team or rugby team or something, doesn't it? The Cornwall Chibbies. They're all dressed up. They've all got little motifs of baby owls. And then the mascot is this deformed looking alien-like creature. Because you must have seen owls with no feathers. But it's fucking like one of those. And it just makes the person in it look proper lanky and long and just bald. Grey as fuck. And just, they look ill. Look, they say the mascot looks like it's got some form of debilitating disease, and they just call themselves the Cornwall Chibbies, and they start building stadiums in Mawnan just to try and get more people there, because that's what the Cornish are desperate for, is tourists. Anyway, the area of Mawnan, speaking of tourists, it does seem like a nice place to go on holiday, and it's become a popular place for paranormal investigators to visit because of the local landlines, which have, as you're probably aware, become rarer and rarer since the years of online gaming. But paranormal investigators are naturally drawn to the past and to nostalgia. Now, I only know the second sighting was during a holiday, but this first sighting was on the 17th of April 1976, and it involved a pair of sisters called June and Vicky Melling, with a G, Melling. Now, this is a legitimate first-hand account of the story, delivered vicariously through a gentleman called Tony Shields with the nickname of Doc. One of the girls, right, she managed to provide a little picture, little hand-drawn doodle, if you like, of the creature that they witnessed. They claim that they saw the monster hover around the tower of St. Mawnan and St. Stephen's, right, which makes it seem like it's flitting between two churches like altar boys in the church Christmas parties. Now, this isn't the case, though. Just like why the paedophilic priests fuck young boys, the Cornish named the church this to make things seem bigger than what they actually are. So in reality, St. Mawnan's and St. Stephen's is just one church. That's all it is, it's just one church. And it's surprising, isn't it, that, a tax haven and focal point for the local paedophilic community, that more churches don't have more than one name, because that way, if there was, say there was a scandal, right, some just out of thin air, say there's a weird scandal, and for whatever reason people start saying priests have been, fucking diddling kids. Let's say it happened at St. Mawnan Church, just hypothetically, Let's say that, 12 choir boys, because we love the number 12. 12 choir boys were diddled at St. Mawnan Church. That means they can always just snap the St. Mawnan bit off the sign of the fence of the church, doesn't it? Now, it's no longer St. Mawnan and St. Stephen's, now it's just St. Stephen's. It does kind of imply that at some point, maybe churches had 5 or 6 names, St. Mawnan's and St. Stephen's and St. Paul's and St. Richard and St. Donald and St. Michael and St. Luke and St. Steve, who's different to St. Stephen, obviously. And but for every paedophilic scandal or monster attack, or for being accused of fucking burning witches, depending how far back you go, or avoiding tax, they remove a name, and they're just left now with St. Mawnan and St. Stephen until the next, and what I imagine would be the last chance they have, because after that, then obviously, if you lose all of the names of a church, all 5 names of the name, of the church is wiped out, no longer exist, and it's turned into some form of community centre, or maybe a different type of place of worship. They're like, we gave the Catholics a go. We gave them multiple chances, tons of chances. We've learned our lesson with that. We don't do that anymore. Now it's just I'm not going to depict the religion, because I don't want to get flagged on YouTube for my first better quality video. But because obviously I record these on YouTube. If you are listening to this as a podcast, you can actually watch these as videos on YouTube. Don't know if it's any good, no idea. But there's 60 odd of them. Maybe you'd enjoy them. Patreon.com/worldaroundyou. It's the money from that goes towards hosting these, paying for shirt designs to have them done. And it's just nice. It's a nice way that you can be like, I enjoy the show. But anyway, getting back into the show, right? Picture the girls, right? Picture the girls and picture the drawing that these girls did. Now, we don't know much about these girls, but it was the 70s, right? There was some artists knocking about, yeah, but think of the art that was big at the time. Most of it probably wasn't that good. We've just come out of the 60s, so odds are the parents were fucking drug-addled, and the DNA's fucked. They've probably not had the best upbringing But they might have been alright though if they're on holiday in Cornwall. Obviously, they might be from a well-to-do family, but well-to-do family back then could mean a lot of drugs. Could mean they had access to an awful lot of decent drugs as well, which means that they could be fucked. So the drawings might not be great, but if you think of the drawing, right, I want you to picture it. It's not very detailed. There's not a lot to go off. But if you imagine a child, right, and they've drawn a bloke with horns and wings, right, except the wings are where his arms are, rather than the placement that the wings would have if they were, like an angel or a demon or like a depiction of a devil kind of thing. Now the legs, it doesn't look like Birdman. Or Bird Person, sorry, from Rick and Morty, right? It looks nothing like Bird Person. Imagine Bird Person, but only with wings, and the wings are somehow front where the arms would be. Just imagine a person with wings instead of arms, basically, and horns, right? Now, the legs, this is where it gets a bit weirder. The legs were feathered as well, innit? So you get the idea that this hybridized creature must have been fucking massive, mate, because if they were able to denote such minute details, right, that means this thing must have been huge, mate. Now they're saying it was the size of a bloke, but it's at the top of a church tower. So to know that, there's got to have been bigger than that, I'm thinking it must be much bigger. And to be able to see the pattern of the feathers like they've drawn must have been fucking massive, mate. Maybe it was some form of spaceship, who knows? That's not the route we're going down, though. We're going the hybridized creature way, innit? Obviously. No mention of the moon, though, this episode, other than this little nod to it there. Nothing about the moon came up, which was interesting. Nothing really about water. There was a little bit of links to water, which we will get to, but not that much. But what I want you to do, right, is go for a walk right now. Just go and get some steps in. And I was also wondering, do you reckon, this is very much of an aside, this has got nothing to do with the show, but I was thinking, do you know how, like, lazy people or fat lazy people, let's say lazy people, do you reckon they want to get steps in, right? But they can't be arsed, and they think, 1,000's daunting, and they're like, I'll just get 500. So they just skip, so they can save a step. Do you reckon anyone is that lazy that they actually skip instead of walking to save on the step counter? But anyway, fucking go for a walk right now, or look out of the window. Keep the show on though, innit? Don't turn the show off. Keep that on, and I need all the listeners I can get at the minute, because I've lost an awful lot of listeners, probably because of going off like this. But never mind, right? Don't turn the show off, and I'll give you a couple seconds, right? Just to peel back the curtains, so you can see out the window, right? Have you done that? Sound right? Stare at that seagull, mate, or the wren, or the pigeon, or the Harris hawk, or whatever it is bird-wise that you've got access to out of your window. You can't see the individual feathers on it, can you, all that well? And the legs might not look entirely feathered either. And you know why that is? I reckon it's because of evolution, mate. The feathers have to be so condensely held together to be able to stop water and the stray semen from the male birds dripping through onto the skin in order to protect the bird from getting some form of rash or getting ill or mouldy, So we've got to question why the owlman has got singular looking feathers. Now, there are types of chickens with a laced patterning, like you've got laced Wyandottes, where they've got a sort of a little black outline to the tips of the feathers, and it makes every feather look individual, although feathers are individual, but it's more prominent because each feather has that little bit of an outline to it. Seabrights as well, I think Seabrights can have it, like lemon Seabrights and that as well, and the silver Seabrights as well. Lemon not so much, gold and silver Seabrights, they've definitely got that black outline to the feathering. So it is possible, it's not impossible to have outlines on feathers, to a certain degree, but I'm thinking what we need to do is focus on the science more and less on the chickens. How do we know that this owlman isn't some form of hybridized creature? A man that's been altered with the DNA of a bird, maybe of an owl, maybe, would make the most sense. Maybe it's not the original hybrid though, but maybe some form of descendant of the hybridized creature, and that's why it's not fully evolved to suit the environment yet. Maybe it's not a hybridized creature though. Maybe it's completely natural, but from a different dimension that's been able to appear in our world because of the landlines that have somehow been blurred, and it took what seemed like the peak physical build to be able to navigate its new surroundings. Legs and wings. If I just appeared in the world, I would never think to myself, I need hands, let alone fucking fingers that move in like fucking 3 ways independently at least. But how did the lines blur? Were they smudged by the unwitting side palm of a guy writing the lines of the country? Or were they rubbed with the wet finger of a wizard of some sort? Well, let's have a song and then we'll look into this a little bit more. This is IDK and Denzel Curry with Dog Food. This week's show's brought to us by HelloFresh. Do you think that you're stuck in a bit of a dinner rut? With HelloFresh, you can get fresh, pre-measured ingredients with mouth-watering seasonal recipes delivered right to your door. Skip all those trips to the shop and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun and affordable. You can now enjoy cooking and get dinner on your table in less than half an hour, or one of them little plastic trays that you pop on your lap. With over 25 recipes to choose from every week, there's going to be something for everyone to enjoy. All recipes are designed and tested by professional chefs and nutritional experts to ensure deliciousness and simplicity. There's a fragrant chicken curry that looks pretty nice. Hoisin beef and mixed veg stir fry sounds quite good and all. But though the picture that they've got here of this cheese and caramelised onion pork steak looks pretty good and all. So if you can imagine what it looks like, I imagine maybe pork loin, boneless pork loin maybe. Let's have a quick look at that. It just says pork steak, but I imagine it's going to be the pork fillet. It says pork steak on the picture. That's pork loin, not off the bone. So it looks like pork loin off the bone with cheese on it and caramelised onions. That's alright, that. Go to the link in the show notes and you can get 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. That's the link in our show notes for 50% off your first box and then 35% off your next 3 boxes. HelloFresh, the #1 meal kit. As it happens, there was a Mancunian that was living down in the southwest, which had an interest, or whom had an interest, or who had an interest. I think who had an interest. Who? Which is nice because it's about owlmen, you know. But he had an interest in ethereal creatures, or extra-dimensional entities, it seems. Now, this bloke's name is Tony Shields. Tony Doc Shields. Doc's the nickname in the middle. And he's said to have investigated the sighting of the creature, also known as the monster of Falmouth Bay, right? Which is nowhere near as good as the Cornish Owlman, because if you just say the monster of Falmouth Bay in a normal voice, doesn't sound cool, doesn't sound not like what you want on a t-shirt, is it? But the Cornish Owlman does, because it's got that man at the end. It makes you think like Batman, Owlman, you know, oh, it's cool. Spider-Man, you know, and Gasman, Fireman, Policeman, you know, they all sound cool, innit? You could easily have. I'd love to make a TV series about the Gasman. Because you could have loads of jokes in it, couldn't you, about like laying pipe, and he's the pipe fitter. No, he can build his pipes. His mind's in the gutter. Gasman! Things like that, you know, and then he could have a tool bag that's always jangling, but he never opens it. No one ever knows what's in there, like that suitcase on Pulp Fiction. And then there's fucking just pipes everywhere. And the opening sequence for it could be that old screensaver that was on everybody's computers of those pipes. And you just watch it for 30 seconds and it's different every episode. 8 episodes a series. Every intro's slightly different. You see the pipes in a different way. And then it just goes, Gasman! And it's just about the life of a gasman who happens to go around saving things. You know, like there's a house fire, and he's like, oh my god, they're going to sue us. That could be the boiler. And this is like the first episode, and then he runs through the wall, like, because he's like a superhero of sorts, but it's also been fire damaged, you know. And it actually turns out it's just like a French door, patio door. He goes through there, bashing it through with his tool bag, and then he goes in and he fixes the boiler and does things like that. He's proper dodgy in it. He fixes the boiler up and then escapes. Doesn't save the dog. Doesn't save anyone in there. He just fixes things like that so that his company doesn't get sued because it's on his rounds kind of thing. Anyway, fuck me. Where was we? We was talking about Doc Tony Shields, wasn't it? Right, and it turns out, right, around the time that he was around there or went down there was another sighting of a monstrous creature in Mawnan. Now, with this one, different people saw it. Again, 2 young girls, 2 young women, let's call them, Sally Chapman and Barbara Perry. And they claim that on the 3rd of July 1976, That's a brief 77 days after the Easter Saturday sighting in April earlier that year. Now, a little side note. If we wanted to try and extrapolate something from the Easter holiday, if you like, and this otherworldly creature appearing, we might actually be able to. We learnt last episode about how King James rewrote the Bible, so there is a good chance it's all made up or completely changed and fabricated and altered. Nothing in it might be the original stories. We don't know that. I don't know that anyway. So therefore, in my eyes, no one knows that. Now, I suppose we can also presume, though, that King James was some form of anti-Semite, because that's a pretty fashionable take, innit, to say that leaders of the world are anti-Semitic. So with that in mind, we should think about stories associated with Easter. To Christians, Easter's the time where Jesus got hammered and then took 3 days to recover from it and sleep it off. And there's a lot of people that also use that mythical event of Jesus' crucifixion, if you like. They used that event to try and turn the public against what would be deemed the Jewish people. Now, in the Jewish faith, Easter time is a celebration of the exodus of Egypt. But what if, much like the rest of the Bible, it's all some form of analogy, and the idea in Exodus, right, is just used to represent the movement from one place to another, and the idea of an exodus is they're leaving somewhere, like, for whatever reason. And obviously that means that everything in it is an analogy. So where it says Jew, it doesn't mean Jewish. It's not actually the Egyptians. It's not actually Egypt. It's not actually a desert. Maybe it's another realm or whatever. And then King James came along and went, this story here, this true account that we've got here, how can we use this to our advantage? We're having a big war at the minute over in Spain, and on the other side of Spain, a little bit further away from Spain, we've got like the Middle East and that, and they've got their own thing going on. Is there any way we can incorporate that in, so we can, if need be, we can fight them later and everyone will be up for it? Just that sort of idea. That's where I'm going with this. That's all I'm thinking. Now, this place of the Exodus, this quote unquote Egypt, it could have been a place that had strict rules, or nothing was left, or it was damaged, or and they moved to a new unknown place, like in Exodus. Realistic, that's what's happening from memory. Now, the strict rules in the story are represented by slavery, but that could be a way to say that the reality of that, where they were, that reality of whatever the story is about, I don't know what it would be about, but let's say that reality there had a lot of restrictions in place, but then they go on to somehow create their own reality. Not the Jewish people. We're viewing this as a story, as an analogy. That's what all of the Bible is, so we're told. So the movement from one place to another may be easier at certain times of the year due to maybe the planetary alignment, or the distance from the sun, or something that we probably can't even comprehend. That would make sense as to why Easter's never at the same time every year, why it seems to have something to do with maybe with the moon. I'm not sure. But even when you use the story of Jesus carking it up on that cross and then walking out as a zombie a few days later, we can also find a little hidden story in that about being able to traverse some form of state of existence around this time of year, the living and the dead, different planes of reality and that, Just a thought for you anyway, to chuck around your head for a bit. Getting back to Sally and Barbara though, they claim that, they say that an owl that was as big as a man, right, that had glowing eyes. Now, these guys were in Cornwall in England, innit? A place in the world that is notorious for its lack of pygmy people, right? One of the many problems modern Cornwall faces is its lack of diversity, so you can only imagine what it was like back in the 1970s. Not a pygmy, Indian or Spaniard in sight, mate. Now, that's if today's anything to go off. So this owl had to have been average height of a man for the 1970s, which would be about 5 foot 10 inches, give or take, whatever the smaller denomination after an inch is. Now, that's a long way off the maximum height of an eagle owl at 2 foot something. Even if we round that up to a 3 foot owl, a 3 foot eagle owl, which would be well over the average height of an eagle owl in the UK, that's nowhere near a couple inches shy of 6 foot. Now, the eagle owl does have what look like little horns on its face, but they're not real horns, they're just feathers in the shape of horns, if you like. And all our witnesses claim that this creature that they saw had horns. They don't claim they had feathers in the shape of horns, so we can disregard the lies here spread by the misinformation agents out there that are claiming that this is just some form of fucking stray eagle owl, well, wild eagle owl. There are some people that claim these girls aren't telling the truth, but to hear a story from two young women about a man of some sort and not believe them, that's not very 2022, is it? These people claim that they only saw the creature because they were already aware of the story of the Owlman. Like, oh, it's fashionable to talk about the Owlman. It happened a few months ago, so-and-so, they got in the paper. Oh, we'll talk about the Owlman and what happened with us and we'll get in the paper. Not very 2022, mate. But in many ways, this is the exact reason to believe their account. Because it means that the Cornish Owlman could be a tulpa of some description, a creature that comes into existence just because it's believed in, a lie or story that manages to take on corporeal form, like man-made climate change has over the past decade or so. If enough people believe in it, that means it exists. Now, I know what you're thinking, well, why isn't Santa or why isn't the Easter Bunny real? But think about how many children exist that believe in them. Then, think about how many adults don't believe in them. I imagine there's always more adults than children, because statistically there's always going to be 2 more adults than children, I would imagine, because that's kind of how it works. I don't know the stats on it, I'm not too sure, because, you know, science isn't our friend here. We're not trying to trust science, we're not trying to use science to explain this stuff away, right? But maybe the very concept of Santa and the Easter Bunny could be damaging to the world. 2 massive figures that seem to centre around this a somewhat loose concept of communism, that only want to give gifts to people and use slavery and to make sure that everyone gets something. That's not very good for the planet, is it? You know, also, if all the kids of the world that believe in Father Christmas were able to magic up Father Christmas, that means that they've also had to magic up all the elves along with Sandy's reindeer-powered sleigh that he has that can travel the earth faster than Concorde could on its first commercial flight of 1976. That's not good for business. So they try to make sure no one believes in him. They've learnt the lessons. They allow the children to believe so that they can crush the spirits as what can only be presumed as some form of maybe a huge spirit cooking activity, maybe a way to bring trauma to children. Maybe even so that during the winter solstice, where the ethereal planes may weaken, the extra-dimensional entities on the other side can probably feast on the misery of those children, like what we learnt in the Lion King episode, right? Because the children's minds are all fractured and temperamental at this point, because you've got the young ones that believe, you've got the ones that are over Christmas because they know Father Christmas isn't real and they're realising Christmas isn't as good as what it used to be because they don't believe in Father Christmas. But then you've got the ones in between as well, mate. The ones that still feel that guilt. The kids that feel guilty because they're tricking their parents into believing that they themselves believe in Father Christmas, because they're worried that without that belief in Father Christmas, they're not going to get any presents anymore and their parents aren't going to give them anything because Father Christmas is no longer around. Speaking of spirit cooking though, that's something that the rich people in America do apparently. Now, I think it's got something to do with torturing children so that they can absorb their energy whilst they rape them. Because, you know, you don't want to rape a child that's happy if you're rich. You know, you want to go on to become a potential president of America. You only want to force yourself inside of a miserable child. That's how it works. But these celebrities supposedly worship some form of owl deity called Moloch, which throughout history has been associated with child sacrifice and has taken on many forms, but apparently, right, in its most recent form, it's supposed to be an owl, mate, an owl. In some writings, Moloch's apparently represented as well by the spelling of Mluk, pronounced Moloch, spelt M-L-K, right, so that's Mlik, or, you know, which is Moloch, it's a cool name, innit, but that MLK there, mate, that got me thinking if the big shift in American civil rights was somehow manufactured, because why not give it them sooner is my point here. You know, why be cunts for so long? Why wait until Mullock's around? Why wait for this owl deity to be knocking about and then have this, you know, Martin? They manufacture this in order to have people all around the world praising Martin Luther King so that the rich people could somehow then trick the public into reading the letters MLK and therefore somehow through some form of mind gymnastics be able to bring some form of power to the rich people's owl deity Moloch. Maybe this was early on in their worship of the god before they realised they needed to actually rape kids rather than simply be aware of this guy's name. But that does feed into some of the demonology stuff, because if people know the name of the demon or the devil that they're dealing with, then apparently they've got some form of control over it in a way. Maybe it doesn't mean that everyone needs to know why they know the name, if that makes sense. They just need to have people say the name or understand the name. Like how Freddy Krueger becomes more powerful if more people believe in him. Even if the adults remember him, that makes him more powerful even though he doesn't affect the adults. There's got to be something there, mate. Freddy Krueger's probably around the 1970s as well, I would imagine. I think it is. Maybe there's a name of a more recent demon invader concealed within Live, Laugh, Love that our kids are going to decipher in, or our grandkids are going to decipher in 60 or 70 years' time, and then look back on now with a similar curiosity. We may never know. Let's have a song though. This is Airstrike by the Four Owls and R.A. the Rugged Man. The second sighting of the Owlman, resulted in the holiday of Sarah Chapman and Barbara Perry being cut short, and the father of at least one of them took them home, meaning that you could easily see this as a made-up story. Maybe the father was embarrassed by the publicity, or the publicity wouldn't look good for a bloke to have taken his daughter and her friend to Cornwall. We don't know anything about the dynamic of the three people, so, we can't really assume anything. We don't know what was going on. But what's even easier is to start seeing a lot of cryptozoological stuff as feminist anti-man propaganda. It's always Mothman, Owlman, the Loveland Frog Men of Ohio, the Tuscum being space penguins. It's never the Dainty Foot, the Loch Ness Monster, or the she-serpents. It's always subtle ways of making the main demographic for cryptozoological species, i.e. young women, afraid of men, scared of blokes, without even knowing, priming them for the future feminist movements that would take place on Twitter in 50, 60 years' time. Now, with the case of the Cornish Owlman, you could even argue they were priming the public to distance themselves from churches, because if you think about it, a church used to be the centre of a village, maybe not like geographically, but it would be the community hub kind of thing, the community centre where they go for tombolas and that, But after years of telling young boys that if they go there, they're going to get raped by a man in a dress wearing a scarf, and decades of convincing young women that they'll be harassed by otherworldly creatures just for stepping foot in a cemetery, it's a surefire way to remove people from conventional religion and push them towards the church of, quote, science, a religion still based in belief, but propagated through numbers known as statistics. Numbers in science isn't a book of the gospel or anything like that. It's statistics rather than songs and weird misleading stories about blind people, donkeys and camels. It's a religion that can be controlled by any country or any language, meaning that ownership of the world's minds can now be transferred just as easily as the control of the world's economy can be changed by just changing the symbol of the currency that gets printed onto each barrel of oil. Or even, right, if you go really deep, even on cartoon depictions of money. It's easy to imagine over the next couple decades illustrations of burglars, right? They're going to have burlap sacks over the shoulder with the symbol for Chinese currency on rather than the dollar symbol, just in order to be ready in the children's minds, just in time for China's takeover. Now, there has been a fair few sightings of Owlman. There was 2 in 1976, then there was 1 in 1979, 1989, another in 1995, and then 1 in 2000, and the most recent sighting, 2019. But I suppose to try and stop this already all over the place episode from getting confusing, I want to introduce you a little bit more to the bloke I mentioned earlier on called Tony Shields, the guy from Salford. Now, he seems to be some form of living legend, innit? He used his skills that he inherited from his dad and his granddad to be able to do sleight of hand and magic, which seemed to then lead him towards other types of magic, maybe even conjuration of some sort. The Tulpa Constructor. It's obvious that the guy's insanely intelligent. He managed to have the photograph of the Loch Ness Monster, right? Seemed to be able to bring the Cornish sea monster known as Morgwar into existence, or at least be able to bring it close enough to the Cornish shores for other people to know it exists. What makes him the most interesting to me, though, is people who seemingly have no clue of his exploits seem to encounter these creatures after he initially made contact with them, even though other people didn't know he'd done it. So that gives some weight to what he was doing in my eyes. Maybe he was making tulpas. Maybe him and his sky-clad witches were opening portals and doorways, mate, to other dimensions and introducing creatures to the world like Aleister Crowley did up at Loch Ness at that weird altar he made. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But someone who does claim to know the truth, an occultist historian called Gareth Medway, says that the doc is a hoaxer, which in words that you and me understand, means that Gareth thinks that the doc, the good doctor, is full of shit. Now, I think it's hard to believe Gareth's assessment because Gareth's an occult historian, but most of the world think that occultism's a crock of shit and isn't real. So in a way, with using Gareth's own logic, we can then question why we'd even believe a word anything Gareth has to say. But let's have a song and then we'll fast forward to sort of modern day-ish. This is Ali by Fred the Godson. So, the year 2019, the world's changing all around us. In some people's eyes, it's ending. In others, it's simply resetting. But for some, it's just another day. The key workers and that, But for a bloke called Mark Davies, who has no obvious relation to Steve Davis, the snooker player, is also spelt differently as well. But regardless of that, I still checked. This fella was hanging around with a guy called Chris Power from Manchester, and they, together, were investigating the ley lines around the St. Mawnan Church, which are known to release energy into our world. Like all the cracks that appeared in Stranger Things without ruining anything. Now, the pair that are knocking about around the cemetery this time, from what I can remember, they heard this bit of a hissing in a tree, so a sss, or a tss, 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 like there's a little jazzy owl thing, or an owlman. The owlman's got a bit of, he's going through his jazz phase, right? And he's just there in the tree like tss, 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 tss. But then he gets pissed off because no one's like, maybe he's a busker and he's still there going tss, 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 and they get a bit too close to him, innit? And then the horned creature fucking throws itself at them, trying to attack them, I presume. Now, this kind of proves that in the past, whatever these creatures were, they were new to our planet because they weren't attacking people, whereas after about 50 years, it's had more than enough time to understand our reality. It's probably, as well, regretting not spawning in with some hands and arms, but instead it's got talons like a massive hawk and wings like some other form of fucking bird of prey. The Cornish Owlman seems like it was finally able to cause injury. Initially, they just felt it pass over their heads, like it's still some form of otherworldly creature that they can maybe only have the power of projecting themselves into this world. But a little while later, Mr. Powers could feel a burning sensation. Only this one was on his arm, so there's no chance it was some form of STD caught from one of the locals. This burning didn't occur as well for at least half an hour afterwards. At the time of the incident, all he felt was a strange surge of energy, and that was recorded by their electromagnetic measuring device that they had on him. Now, they were using that as well, and whilst they were using it, they were also asking questions which seemed to be getting some form of feedback, as if to like a conscious feedback that made sense to the questions being asked. Like they would ask a question and they get feedback. Now, I don't know if they did the proper scientific method. I kind of hope not, because we don't want to use science for this, do we, really? But I'm hoping there was some form of test done beforehand to make sure the equipment's not dodgy. They seem to know what they're doing, though. They know what they're doing. So I imagine what they're saying there is spot on. They were getting some feedback. Obviously, it doesn't happen all the time, otherwise they wouldn't have made a note of it. Now, unfortunately, though, Chris was injured during his experience, and I do hope he's okay now. Maybe he's got himself some cool scars, you know, from the Cornish Owlman, because that'd be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Like, there's a guy with half a leg, and he's like, fucking did this in Iraq, mate. And you know, someone else is there with an eye missing, going, yeah, fucking graze, mate, pointing at his face, going, fucking graze. And then Mr. Powers is there going, look at his arm, and it's all fucking burning still, somehow giving off some form of radiation maybe, or just some weird sparkles and a weird glow and emanating some loose thin smoke. And he's like, fucking Cornish Owlman, lad, I did this. And everyone's like, fucking hell, is that you? You're that guy, you know. But unfortunately as well, the camera was broken, presumably, I imagine, by the Cornish Owlman in this unprovoked attack, which means that all the evidence I'm aware of is the scars and the story. But for me, that's enough, because unlike other people in today's world, I believe the victim. I'll fucking see you in a bit.